Just quickly before we get into this review, I am super excited to let you know that 2 new art books I created are available now worldwide. The books are Roller Derby Girl Gang, an art anthology, and She's a Wildcat, The Art of Candy. Since you're watching this channel, you probably appreciate a good art book, and so I would be incredibly grateful if you'd consider checking them out. Instagram is the best place to go to find out more about the books, or just follow the top link in the description to find out where you can order a copy. This is a review of The Art of Assassin's Creed Odyssey. If you haven't seen it already, I think it might be helpful to first watch the review I did on The Art of Assassin's Creed Origins, just as a point of reference for some of the things I'm going to discuss here. I will be reiterating a lot of the same stuff just because they are so similar, but I also want to highlight any differences. The biggest difference being that while I only kind of liked the Origins book, I really like this one. Well, the art at least. Which is the first time I can say that about an Assassin's Creed art book, although as an art book, it still does wallow in many of the same lamentable shortcomings that have always plagued these Assassin's Creed art books. But those can be chalked up to minor annoyances when compared to just how incredible the art is, which is of course the deciding factor for acquiring any art book. Although, as I talked about in the Origins review, because it's the art, that means it's completely subjective and you may have a completely different opinion. But in terms of my impression, I just can't stress how breathtaking and inspiring the artwork is. My previous issues regarding Assassin's Creed concept art are still very much present in this book, but they are significantly diminished thanks to a wider balance of types of art and the actual content being depicted in the works and the look everything has. It's really overcome those issues. For example, it's still very much done in that same blurry, unpolished around the edges style I talked about in the last video, but it just doesn't feel like as much of an issue. Likewise, my dissatisfaction with what was being depicted and how it was being depicted and the somber nature of the art has also seen a major change that's really responsible for this adoration. I mean, to be fair, it's a change that really started with the Unity art book and then Syndicate, where a lot of the art became less focused on vistas and individual characters and more on vignettes evoking story, action that inflamed the imagination. Obviously, Syndicate and Unity were at a significant disadvantage given their bleak settings didn't really lend themselves to rising above the dour feeling that dominated Assassin's Creed concept art, whereas the more exotic and fantastical setting of semi-mythical ancient Greece has been embraced, and for the first time the art has more vibrance to the colors and lighting that really brings it alive in a way I haven't seen for Assassin's Creed concept art before, especially when combined with this more interesting direction of what they're choosing to depict, or at least show in this book, for the first time captures the excitement and beauty of the games. It still looks like Assassin's Creed art, but it also looks so different to anything previous. I've always found the art books underwhelming and a little boring, even Origins, but this one, the art is such a pleasure to look at again and again. I've lost track of how many times I've gone through it. In terms of book design, like all Assassin's Creed art books, at first glance it looks stunning, until you start to pay attention to the pretty awful sizing and layout of the images that almost comes close to ruining the book. Because function is being sacrificed for form in an attempt to sell a book that looks impressive. Now, I love me a handsome art book, but never at the expense of content, which is the actual reason I buy these books and should always be priority number one. So when you have a book like this, where 90% of the images are at least twice as large as they need to be, that means the book's missing out on potentially double the amount of content it could have, which is especially annoying because I've seen tons of great concept art for the game online that isn't included in this book. Similarly, like in all Assassin's Creed art books, this decision to put form over function includes an overabundance of images running across 2 pages, which results in crap like this, where you have the main figure of an artwork almost completely lost in the center, spoiling the image. One interesting thing I noticed was that for a number of environment images, the captions note that they are in-game captures or 3D renders, contrary to how I feel about film stills in movie art books or stills from a game's cutscenes. I think in-game photography is a completely different situation, and I really like it as long as they look great and have merit, which these ones do. But I wanted to point this out as I know some people will be really annoyed they're taking up space with captures and renders that should be used for art. Though what's really weird is I can't actually tell most of them are in-game captures. Like, even when the text points it out, the images just don't look 3D or like they're from the game at all, to the point that I wonder if maybe there's been some confusion in what the book is terming in-game captures, or maybe it's just me. At any rate, this appreciation of in-game photography and location renders does not extend to 3D character and object renders, which this book does have a few of. So for some characters like Pythagoras or Socrates, or pretty much all of the ships, there's no actual art, just a full-page 3D render looking like it's been taken straight out of the game. This book also follows the unfortunate trend of other Assassin's Creed art books, where there is very little exploration of designs, early concepts, unused ideas, etc. There is a little bit more than there was in Origins, which is nice, but most of the characters look exactly how they appear in the game. They've even taken up space including the exact same concept artwork of Layla already seen in the Origins book. And like in the Origins book, it's especially frustrating when the text next to the character says something like, "We explored so many different versions for such and such," and all we get is one full-page image of that character looking like they do in the game. Or look at Medusa, for example, who you'd think would be a character with so many design possibilities, yet all we get is 4 almost identical images taking up a whole spread, and that's it. After the absolute shit show that was the text in the Origins art book, I was so thrilled to learn that this book was going to have a different author. Unfortunately, although she is less obnoxious, she's made the lazy and inept decision to try and follow as closely in the previous author's footsteps as possible. So all we get is one hack trying to imitate the last hack. And I mean, it's not just the authors, the editors, publisher, Ubisoft, even the team members who contributed commentary should all be absolutely ashamed that this is their continued approach. The overall direction of the text is established in the foreword by the art director, which has nothing to do with the art, the development of the game, not even anything personal on what it was like creating it. It's literally just a hyping up of how amazing the game is. It's the exact sort of aggrandizing PR jargon you hear when games are announced on stage at E3 or something. Our dynamic day and night cycles, players will be blessed with the chance to explore our most compelling setting ever. And usually I don't mind forwards being indulgent, but in this case it's not only extra pathetic, but pretentious of the book's text overall. The direct commentary from the artists themselves has dwindled to almost nothing. It seriously feels like there's about 20 one-sentence quotes from people who actually worked on the game, only half of which are interesting, but too short for any actual insight, and the other half are just frivolous. Essentially zero behind-the-scenes info or anything about the creation of the game or art. And the author, whose words make up 99% of the text, doesn't offer anything interesting enough to make up for that either. Like I said in the Origins book, the text on historical and mythological information is interesting, but it just feels like occasional trivia, and if they weren't going to put effort into having good behind-the-scenes text, they could have at least doubled down on the historical info and made that the sole direction of the book. Other than that, the text boils down to 2 categories. 1, marketing pitch fluff highlighting how incredible different aspects of the game are and what an amazing journey the game is for players, or 2, descriptions of who the characters are, the locations, and the story. And again, I'm just left wondering, for whose benefit is any of that? If you've already played the game, you know about the characters and story, and they don't need to keep pitching all the amazing stuff you do in the game, so it's all just a waste of your time. Reading it, you'd think it's being aimed at people who haven't played the game, which is doubly ridiculous, considering the text is also riddled with spoilers. So who do they perceive is going to find this sort of text valuable? The real answer is they're lazy and don't care. And why shouldn't they be? All they need to do to get your money is make sure that the book looks good at a glance when you flick through it or see pictures of it. In fact, if this book had have had no text, I would have been slightly surprised and disappointed, but it wouldn't have really bothered me. Whereas this is just insulting, and why I'm making such a big deal out of something relatively unimportant. I mean, I truly wish I could tell you not to get the book to show that fans won't support this kind of crap and hopefully encourage change, but I can't, because despite its serious flaws as an art book, these are far outstripped by the amazing art itself, and so I don't regret getting it for a second. And so, just to wrap up, let's quickly run through the other Assassin's Creed art books, because I'm probably not ever going to do reviews on them, but like I said, my opinions of the art in the books are completely subjective, and so despite everything I've said about them, I still absolutely encourage you to look into them and form your own opinion. So the first art book I'm aware of was for Assassin's Creed 1 that came with the limited edition strategy guide, and this wasn't like some tacked on extra you see with a lot of strategy guides that claim to feature art. This was a completely separate, full, proper hardcover art book. Then there was a Japanese book that combined art from the first two games. No art books for Brotherhood or Revelations beyond, those crappy little art books that come with collector's editions of games. In fact, I believe all of the main Assassin's Creed games have one of those, but it was the art of Assassin's Creed 3 that was the first real, independent, mass-released art book in English for Assassin's Creed. This was the first one I ever got, and where my disappointment all began. Looking back, that's unfortunate, though not surprising, as it's definitely the weakest entry. It wasn't even particularly well designed, and only had 140 pages, whereas all the others have around 200. The Art of Black Flag was then another huge letdown, as it failed to capture that idea of exotic, swashbuckling pirate adventure the game had. Then the art books for Unity and Syndicate, which I actually think they really stepped up their game in terms of art, layout, and design, but by the time they rolled around, I'd sort of given up, and like I said earlier, the setting of those games wasn't really conducive for turning around my established opinions of Assassin's Creed concept art. Then of course we get to Origins and Odyssey, which has now actually kind of got me excited for the art of Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Well, the art anyway, not the layout and text, which I doubt will see any change. One thing that sucks about art books being released concurrent with the game is they never get to feature any of the DLC art. I think it'd be really cool if they made a compilation book collecting art from the various DLCs. Also, all of the art books since Assassin's Creed 3 have had limited collector's versions, but anyone with a brain needn't worry about those. There's also a bunch of other Assassin's Creed related books that feature concept art, but I won't take up any more time going through those here, as I will be doing reviews on all of them very soon.